Envy and Gratitude, Melanie Klein audiobook, Part 4. My work has taught me that the first object to be envied is the feeding breast. For the infant feels that it possesses everything he desires, and that it has an unlimited flow of milk and love, which the breast keeps for its own gratification. This feeling adds to his sense of grievance and hate, and the result is a disturbed relation to the mother. If envy is excessive, this, in my view, indicates that paranoid and schizoid features are abnormally strong, and that such an infant can be regarded as ill. Throughout this section, I am speaking of the primary envy of the mother's breast, and this should be differentiated from its later forms, inherent in the girl's desire to take her mother's place and in the boy's feminine position, in which envy is no longer focused on the breast, but on the mother receiving the father's penis, having babies inside her, giving birth to them, and being able to feed them. I have often described the sadistic attacks on the mother's breast as determined by destructive impulses. Here I wish to add that envy gives particular impetus to these attacks. This means that when I wrote about the greedy scooping out of the breast and of the mother's body, and the destruction of her babies, as well as putting bad excrements into the mother, this adumbrated what I later came to recognize as the envious spoiling of the object. If we consider that deprivation increases greed and persecutory anxiety, and that there is in the infant's mind a fantasy of an inexhaustible breast, which is his greatest desire, it becomes understood how envy arises even if the baby is inadequately fed. The infant's feelings seem to be that when the breast deprives him, it becomes bad because it keeps the milk, love, and care associated with the good breast all to itself. He hates and envies what he feels to be the mean and grudging breast. It is perhaps more understandable that the satisfactory breast is also envied, the very ease with which the milk comes. Though the infant feels gratified by it, it also gives rise to envy, because this gift seems something so unattainable. We find this primitive envy revived in the transference situation. For instance, the analyst has just given an interpretation which brought the patient relief and produced a change of mood from despair to hope and trust. With some patients, or with the same patient at other times, this helpful interpretation may soon become the object of destructive criticism. It is then no longer felt to be something good he has received and has experienced as an enrichment. His criticism may attach itself to minor points. The interpretation should have been given earlier. It was too long and has disturbed the patient's associations, or it was too short, and this implies that he has not been sufficiently understood. The envious patient grudges the analyst the success of his work, and he feels that the analyst and the help he is giving has become spoilt and devalued by his envious criticism. He cannot introject him sufficiently as a good object, nor accept his interpretations with real conviction and assimilate them. Real conviction, as we often see in less envious patients, implies gratitude for a gift received. The envious patient may also feel, because of guilt about devaluing the help given, that he is unworthy to benefit by analysis. Needless to say, our patients criticize us for a variety of reasons, sometimes with justification. But a patient's need to devalue the analytic work, which he has experienced as helpful, is the expression of envy. In the transference, we discover the root of envy if we trace back the emotional situations we encounter in earlier stages, down to the primary one. Destructive criticism is particularly evident in paranoid patients who indulge in their sadistic pleasure of disparaging the analyst's work, even though it has given them some relief. In these patients, envious criticism is quite open. In others, it may play an equally important role, but remains unexpressed and even unconscious. In my experience, the slow progress we make in such cases is also connected with envy. We find that their doubts and uncertainties about the value of the analysis persist. What happens is that the patient has split off the envious and hostile parts of his self and constantly presents to the analyst other aspects that he feels to be more acceptable. Yet the split-off parts essentially influence the course of the analysis, which ultimately can only be effective if it achieves integration and deals with the whole of the personality. Other patients try to avoid criticism by becoming confused. This confusion is not only a defense, but also expresses the uncertainty as to whether the analyst is still a good figure, or whether he and the help he is giving have become bad because of the patient's hostile criticism. This uncertainty I would trace back to the feelings of confusion that are one of the consequences of the disturbed earliest relation to the mother's breast. The infant who, owing to the strength of paranoid and schizoid mechanisms and of the impetus of envy, cannot divide and keep apart successfully love and hate, and therefore the good and bad object, is liable to feel confused between what is good and bad in other connections.